and let's find out if anyone played Mortal Kombat 1. Welcome everyone, I am OldBit, and this is Did Anyone Play? A series where we investigate, analyze, and determine the truth about how much gamers have truly played and completed games. How do we do this? We use trophy and achievement milestones within games and then compare those results to our huge gaming database to evaluate and rank games compared to the rest of the industry. Using objective data and statistical comparisons, we can draw conclusions. We aren't reviewing the game in a traditional sense. Our goal is to provide analysis that can be better used to understand player behavior while ignoring game sales and hype to ensure we see reality as it truly is. Please drop a like or a sub to the channel if you want more of these types of videos. We're just starting out, so anything you do is very much appreciated. We love the support we see already. And a quick spoiler warning, as we may be talking about some elements of late game progression. And keep note that this is a fighting game with a number of different modes, so we have picked milestones that we think best provide a view on how gamers actually played the game with a focus on single player components. So let's find out if anyone actually played Mortal Kombat 1 on Xbox, PlayStation, and Steam. Remember that all percentages we'll be talking about here come from the total number of players that have actually launched and or played the game, not bought the game, so the results are a full reflection on how gamers played Mortal Kombat 1. The first milestone that players will likely reach is called Titan. This milestone is achieved once a player deals 10,000 damage to opponents. This can happen across all modes, including the story, tower, local, and online multiplayer, so essentially, just playing the game in any way will get a player to this milestone. So how many players made it to this first one? On Steam, 62.2% of players did this damage. PlayStation had 68%, and Xbox saw 65.1% of players do this. So these numbers feel a bit low for overall player engagement at the start. Let's go to the graph. MK1 is doing worse than the average on all platforms. Now, that may be because this is not an easy early tutorial milestone, but it's possibly concerning that 30 to 40% of players never played enough to hit this damage milestone. But it's just the start, we'll see where this goes. So what is Mortal Kombat 1? It's a single and multiplayer fighting game that has been around since 1992. Don't let that 1 in the title fool you. This is actually the second reboot of Mortal Kombat, but also is a sequel to the last game, Mortal Kombat 11. Not confusing at all, is it? It contains a strong story campaign, a separate invasions mode for seasonal content, and a ranked mode which is always the core of a fighting game. The story takes about 9 hours to complete, and it was developed by NetherRealm Studios and published by Warner Brothers. Mortal Kombat 1 released on September 19th, 2023 for the platforms. The second milestone all players would likely reach is called Abacab, or A-B-A-C-A-B-B, but I like Abacab. This is awarded after a player uses a key for the first time in Invasions. This happens during the tutorial for Invasions, and the first milestone a player can hit in this mode. It doesn't take much time to get to this. So how many players made it here? Steam has 48.7% of players achieving this. PlayStation is at 40.6%, and Xbox is at 42.3%. These numbers really show that less than 50% of players that played MK1 ever touched the invasion mode. That could be good or bad depending on how you feel about a side mode in a fighting game. I lean a little bit more to the positive side of thinking on this one. It's always good to understand the competition a game was up against when it was launched. What was happening around September 19th of 2023 in the gaming world? Well, titles like Lies of P, Payday 3, and The Crew Motorfest came out around this time on the platforms. Looking at Google Trends, we can see that MK1 in Blue was strong at the time of release, but with strong competition from Lies of P and Payday 3. So it's clear that the hype was high for Mortal Kombat, and the competition was strong as well. We'd like to pick a mid-game marker for our third milestone. Here we have chosen a new timeline. This is awarded for reaching the halfway point in the story mode, which is always a premier draw in NetherRealm games. How many players reach this milestone? Steam has 48.6% of players, PlayStation has 42.7%, and Xbox has 43%. Now here we see a very strong result, and at a halfway point in the story, MK1 is well above the industry average for mid-game milestones. This bodes well. How did MK1 do with critics? Metacritic for PlayStation rates it at an 83 out of 100, Xbox at an 84, and PC at an 82. On Steam, users have rated it mostly positive all time, but recently mixed, with over 17,000 reviews. OpenCritic rating is at 84, with 88% of critics recommending it. I think we can say the reception was strong for MK1. The most important milestone is our fourth one. This is for completing the main objective and what we base our industry ranking on. It definitely shows how many players finished the game and truly played Mortal Kombat 1. This milestone is called What Just Happened, and it's awarded when a player completes 100% of the story mode. Where does MK1 end up on the different platforms? On Steam, 43% of players completed the game. For PlayStation, it was 37.6%, and on Xbox, it was 37.1%. This is a tremendous hold from the mid-game milestone. And now that we've reached the end of the game, we want to check the percentage of players that quit the game after making it through the first milestone, but failing to reach game completion. Mortal Kombat is doing exceptional here, with Steam the best and PlayStation the worst, but all are doing great. Mortal Kombat really held on to players well after the initial losses. Finally, to get a feel for how the completionists treated this game, the rare milestone 5 chosen for MK1 is called Rollin' With My Crew. This milestone can be achieved if the player achieves mastery with 5 different cameo characters. This is a huge grind, I should know, I actually did it. For Steam, we see that 1.4% of players actually accomplished this, on Xbox 0.9% of players did it, and on PlayStation 1% of players did it. Now let's see the full picture. Here are the raw milestones for MK1 with the industry averages in gray for comparison purposes. Let's get into it. Keep in mind, for MK1 this graph could be a bit misleading, since the milestones do not show a traditional game progression. Milestone 1 shows engagement overall with damage accumulation. Milestone 2 shows if anyone played the invasions mode in the most rudimentary sense. Milestones 3 and 4 are directly for the story progression, and that shows players really did engage at a strong level and played to the end. Steam is the strongest platform on average, with Xbox coming in second and PlayStation a close third. So this is our final tally for our milestones, but now let's see how the game stacks up against all other games in our database and find out if anyone truly played Mortal Kombat. We use Milestone 4 as our ultimate ranking target. Here are the results for each platform for Milestone 4 once again. It's time to reveal the final rank MK1 has in our database. Here we go. Steam is a 9 out of 10, PlayStation is an 8 out of 10, and Xbox is an 8 out of 10. Nearly everyone played Mortal Kombat 1 on Steam, and both PlayStation and Xbox had a ton of players play it as well. This is a superb result, especially for a fighting game. The player retention on MK1 is a resounding success through the story. So those are the industry rankings, but our database is able to give us other comparisons as well. Let's break it down. Here we can show the breakdown for MK1 across class, genre, review score, and game length. Please keep in mind that because we are comparing data across smaller subsets, the statistical power of these rankings are far weaker than our overall industry ranking. Starting off with class comparison, MK1 is a AAA game. So ranking it compared to all other AAA contemporaries, we see that the results are slightly weaker. Steam lowers to an 8, but PlayStation and Xbox stayed an 8. Gamers played it just a little less compared to other AAA titles. How about genre? We've classified MK1 as a fighter, of course. Compared to other games in that genre, we see that it ranks a 10 on Steam, and PlayStation is again at an 8, and Xbox increases to a 9. Here, MK1 is flexing its muscles against other fighting games. Next is ranking based on reviews. The scores for MK1 put in the category with games that have scored in the 80s for OpenCritic. The review rankings compared to other similarly reviewed games has Steam dropped to an 8, and PlayStation and Xbox both dropped to a 7. MK1 performed weaker compared to games with similar scores. Lastly is ranking based on average game completion length. MK1 is in the 0 to 10 hours range. Rankings compared to similar length games has Steam at a 10, but no change on PlayStation and Xbox at an 8. So those are the rankings. But now let's see if we can tease out some other observations by looking at these results in different ways. It's time for the deep dive. Let's start with progressive player loss. Each group shows how many total players have stopped playing the game at that particular milestone. A couple points are that the PlayStation was strongest when it came to players doing damage in the game, while Steam was the strongest for invasions and story. Moving on, we can look at milestone player retention. This calculation only takes into account the player population loss as a percentage compared to the previous milestone. Here, previous milestones only matter between milestone 3 and 4. So looking at milestone 4, you can see great player retention where MK1 lost only around 11% of players across the platforms from the middle of the story mode to the end of the story mode. That's a great hold. Now how about completionists? How did the rarest milestones shake out on the different platforms? Steam takes the win here with PlayStation and Xbox coming in close to each other for second and third. Finally, we check on early versus late game retention. When you read a chart like this, the best performers are further away from the center of the circle. Early game, Steam is doing the best. That's for damage and invasion mode. Endgame loss, PlayStation takes a tiny lead for both story milestones. And completionist loss was nearly identical, with Steam eking out a tiny lead. Let's take one final look at all the platforms and their Milestone 4 results, but this time we show you the full percent rank within our database. This is to give you a detailed view of how rankings played out. Use this data as you will. Let's wrap this up. So what are our major takeaways from all the data? Mortal Kombat 1 did excellent in terms of results and rankings. This is a premier AAA fighting game experience, and clearly gamers were engaged with what NetherRealm delivered. Nearly everyone who played this game truly played this game based on rankings. Steam was the platform of choice, but Xbox and PlayStation weren't far behind. And it's clear that story mode was a huge hit. That's not surprising, as NetherRealm is known for their impressive story campaigns in their fighting games, and MK1 is no different. It was also great to see Xbox outperform PlayStation, as normally Game Pass has held some games back for that platform. Clearly, MK1 is a game that resonates across both consoles in the same way. We also saw that when we look at genre, MK1 is showing even stronger results. Getting a perfect 10 on Steam for a ranking truly shows MK1 is in a league of its own when it comes to retaining players through the story. But I do want to talk about the elephant in the room. There are signs that MK1 is not all rosy when it comes to player retention. With this story, there is another milestone a player can achieve if they complete the last chapter twice. If you do this, the enemies that you fight can be different, and it shows a little bit more of the craziness and effort that NetherRealm put into the story. But if we take Steam as an example, 43% of players finished the story as we saw earlier, but only 5.5% of players completed the last chapter twice. That's a massive drop. How about invasions? We had 48.7% use a key in invasions, which is the earliest milestone you can hit. But how many players on Steam completed an invasion and beat the final boss? Only 11.9%. Finally, what about multiplayer? Just playing online, there is a milestone where a player just has to play 5 Combat League sets, not even win them, and Steam is at 16.6%. These numbers do show that while a high percentage of players engaged in an early game or finished the story once, a much smaller percentage of players engaged in the deeper parts of MK1. Just some food for thought. Mortal Kombat as a franchise is a juggernaut, and MK1 is a strong entry in the series. Players absolutely played this game and experienced a lot of what was on offer. The story offered both a reboot and a continuation of the previous entry, and that's a hard line to walk. A fighting game usually draws in gamers with characters and gameplay, but Mortal Kombat also has its story as a third prong to pull in players, and clearly, it was effective this time around. And that's a wrap. Hopefully you all found this data interesting, and we all learned a little bit more about our gaming world today, and Mortal Kombat 1 in particular. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to do all the YouTube support stuff. Give us a like, a sub if you haven't already. I'd love to read any comments you have down below. What conclusions do you all take from this data? And of course, feel free to suggest the next game we should look at to determine if anyone played it. Until then, take care of yourself and each other.